Right, my name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Rebecca Sweet. It's January 27th, 2025. We're at the Nicholson Library at Linfield University in McMinnville. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today. First question is why wine or why viticulture?
That's a good starting point, a common one. When you start working in the industry, people ask you that question. And my answer is it sort of, the vines sunk their tendrils into me. I was interested in ecological farming systems, and I started at Oregon State University in 2002 in studying cover crops in corn and beans and trying to find a solution to root disease pathogens with cover crops. And I ended up not being super happy with my lab, and started talking to other folks in the horticulture department, and Annie Connolly was the extension agent at the time, and she took me under her wing and ran me around to all the different vineyards that she was working with and introduced me to people in the industry. And she said, we just don't know a single thing about cover crops really in Oregon in wine grapes. And that was partially true. There were a couple papers published in the 80s and 90s, but really, like two. And so there was a lot to be learned. And I was able to convince Paul Schreiner to take me on in his lab. Dr. Boyer, who was department head at the time, got me a teaching position, so I was able to do some teaching in graduate school at Oregon State, and while I wrote some grants to the Center for Small Fruits, and they supported they ended up granting me enough money to support my work as a graduate student for 2 years, and ended up doing some really fun floor treatments, cover crop floor treatments at Archery Summit with Lee Bartholomew at the head of the helm there, and with Sterling Fox. He was working at Jacob Hart Vineyard at the time. So both of those two it took me on, and they were super supportive of me, and at the same time, I started meeting with the Live program in the basement at Sahaley, which was a wine bar in Corvallis, owned by Matt Compton and his partner. And so I'd meet there with Al McDonald and Ted Castile and Matt Compton and whoever else was coming around to discuss the Live standards at the time. It was a pretty young certification, and I was super interested in the sustainability standards. Defining what it is to be a sustainable farming operation was just fascinating to me. And so I just hung around and listened and participated in those conversations from 2004 on, and it's 20 years ago. So, and the grapes, just kind of sunk their tendrils into me. I didn't plan on having a career in the wine industry at all. There was wine on the table when we could afford it when I was a kid. My dad loved wine. I'm from California, grew up in California, but so it's part of my culture, I'd say, but not like I wasn't steeped in it. And even my first job out of college was in blueberries. So I didn't go straight to work in the wine industry. But then the 2008 recession happened and blueberries tanked. And even though I really liked the job and they liked me, I was managing 20 acres of organic blueberries for Gingrich Farms in Canby. And I was also responsible for their habitat management on their, I don't even remember how many hundreds of acres, I think 500 acres or something close to that. They were grass seed farmers, hazelnut farmers, and then blueberries. And they had lots of edges, waterways. We did a big composting program. We chipped a bunch of hazelnut prunings and then used them to mulch blueberries. because there was no sawdust available because of the recession. Anyway, that was a cool job that I lost because I was the low person on the totem pole there, and they couldn't afford anybody like me anymore. So that led to my first vineyard management job.
Pick it back up there in a minute. I have lots of questions about a lot of that. Let's back up before that. Tell me about being where you're born and raised and kind of path out of high school.
Path out of high school, back up, okay. I grew up, I think it's important to start before high school because of the way I identify with land and place. I'm a sixth generation Northern Californian, so I'm a daughter of the pioneers, and I really identify with that part of my heritage. And so I was raised on the Calaveras River Canyon, in Calaveras County, and I went to a tiny little elementary school and a tiny little junior high, and I just spent my whole summers just running around in the oak trees, this oak savanna habitat, floating down the river on an inner tube, and it was I had a lot of freedom as a child to just explore the countryside, and I don't know, really romanticized that a lot, especially when my dad and my brother and I moved to Fresno County as a freshman in high school. So I was plucked out of this beautiful place that I grew up in and then plunked into this little ag town in the Fresno County, and I just looked around and I thought, where do the wild things live? This is just wall-to-wall agriculture, and pretty intensely farmed agriculture at that. Lots of sprays going out, and I was an amateur, budding botanist and naturalist, and I wanted to find the birds and the wild things, and when you're a teenager, you're broody and you spend a lot of time hating things, and and so it was hard for me to embrace the beauty of the Central Valley ag production, which there's a lot of beauty to it, right? It's oranges and cotton and peaches and grapes and just luscious, sugary things coming out of that valley, and culturally really rich as well, all the many people who live and work there. But I would go from the Central Valley, on the edge of the valley. I shouldn't say the central, because where we lived was on the edge of the eastern edge of the valley. And I drive up, once I got my driver's license, to see my grandparents in the Sierra foothills. And that was like night and day. There were the birds, there were the wild things, there was the native habitats. And that was my those were my teenage years. They were very formative, like in terms of just identifying with place.
So heading into college, how did you choose school, and what were you thinking you would do with your life?
I thought I would study biology, natural resources is what I really was fascinated by, the diversity of everything, and never knew what I wanted to do when I grew up until I was doing it, basically. And I went to community college, American River College. I did that because my dad couldn't afford to pay for university, and he discouraged me from taking on loans at that age. And so I went to American River College in Sacramento, and that worked out pretty well. I was able to take on some leadership roles that I don't think I would have at a bigger university. Like there was no recycling program on campus, for example, no beverage container recycling. It was pretty kind of low-hanging fruit at the time. We're talking 1994, 95. And so I started an environmental club, and we started a recycling program. We started having events for Earth Day, and just kind of, brought the environmental movement to American River College, which is about time. It was a big college, for a junior college. So I was kind of surprised that nothing like that was going on. But I got a lot of engagement, and it was really fun. I worked at REI, and so that opened up a lot of backcountry experiences. Yeah, I never had done any backpacking or skiing or anything like that. I worked as a river guide in the summers, so whitewater, did a lot of rafting, learned how to whitewater kayak, and spent a lot of time on rivers. From then on, basically until I became a mother, and that all went into the barn and it started collecting dust. That's okay. But yeah, then I moved up from there. Well, I should point out that when I was at American River College working at REI, I met my most important mentor and still dear friend, Dr. Bob Bugg, and Dr. Robert Bugg, I should say, but he's Bob to us. He was buying shoes at REI, and he and I hit it off and became friends 30 years ago, and we've been friends ever since. And he was working for UC Sustainable Ag Research and Extension, SARE, out of Davis, and started taking me around to his projects, tailwater ponds and integrated pest management projects in orchards, and invited me to fabulous dinner parties with all of his friends, and started really just filling my brain with lots of interesting information, and continues to do that. So then I went to Humboldt State. I transferred, and I wanted to get as far away from California as I could without paying out-of-state tuition. That's my line about Humboldt State.
It's pretty true.
Yeah. And their biology program was solid, and it was a beautiful place to go to school. Absolutely stunning, in the redwoods, on the coast, and definitely enjoyed the 2 years I spent there. Finished my bachelor's in '99. Then I took a year off and traveled. I went to Europe and drank a lot of crappy wine out of boxes in Spain, and I also drank some really good wine out of people's basements as I was woofing. So I did willing workers on organic farms in Europe, and so mostly it was in Italy, actually, where I was exposed to some really interesting wines that I had never known. It opened up my it was that aha moment, like, oh, this is so much more than the swaggy, Carlo Rossi that my dad used to drink. But it makes you realize like what people are so excited about. Yeah. So, but I think that the travel was so much more just perspective building. Getting out of my country and understanding other people, and very important part of my education. Spent 5 months in Europe, came home, spent the summer in Alaska, kayaking from Glacier Bay to Sitka, which is 250 miles, and took us 2 months, my boyfriend and I. Kind of crazy stuff. That's the stuff you do when you're young, if you're lucky. And I definitely was another one of the great experiences of my life. What happened after that? I came to Portland. I went to Portland and did a year of AmeriCorps because I wanted to go to school at Oregon State University and study and become a resident and live in Oregon.
Why Oregon State?
Why Oregon State? Oregon, because of Oregon. Because it's located in Oregon, that's why. And I knew I wanted to do land-based work, and I wanted to develop relationships and a deep understanding of place. I didn't want to go to school at the best ag school and then try to find the best job somewhere doing agricultural related stuff. I wanted to know the place, and I knew I wanted to be in Oregon. I didn't want to be too far away from my family in California. But I didn't want to be in California anymore. And I saw the Willamette Valley having agricultural opportunities. So that's why Oregon and Oregon State is the ag school. And so, the year of AmeriCorps got me the residency I wanted, more perspective that I wanted. I did like volunteer organization and service learning was my objective. for Hands-On Portland. That's who I worked for in Portland that AmeriCorps year. And that was when Portland was, peaking at its greatness of hipster amazingness. And it was a pretty great time to be in Portland. But then, I moved down to Corvallis in 2002, started with the graduate program that I described with cover crops and disease suppression, and then wine grapes.
So at what point, you mentioned cover crops specifically, why cover crops, how did that become an interest?
So I mentioned Dr. Bug. He introduced me to the concept of cover crops. He did a lot of his work in cover crops and cover cropping systems and integrated pest management and how it relates. And pollinators really weren't a thing when he was doing his work. And so we didn't really speak in terms of pollinators so much, more integrated pest management and predatory and parasitoid insects and how those respond to cover crops. So he opened up that interest, and cover crops to me just seemed like a no-brainer thing for agricultural systems, for all the benefits that they provide, right? And the list just keeps growing and growing and growing. At first it was just tack down the dirt, keep it from blowing away. And then it was fix nitrogen and provide, nitrogen to the next cash crop. And then we started learning about, soil quality and the carbon fraction of soils and how that's part of what soil is organic matter, and then the role that organic matter plays in, and soil structure plays in water percolation, infiltration through soils. And so there's a, hydraulic element to it. It's physics. Maria Dragila taught a soil physics class at Oregon State. And I just remember she was such a fantastic teacher, and just, wow, this is another thing that soils do. They filter your water, they keep it from running off the surface into, with the particulates into waterways and causing all kinds of problems there. So just so multifunctional. The list goes on, right? The roles that cover crops can play, and then you add in the diversity of, summer cover crops, winter cover crops, perennial cover crops, flowering cover crops now for pollinators, and it's just, it's a playground to me of tools. The toolbox is just vast, really, and with organic systems, with herbicides, as a tool, there's a whole other things you can do. It's just like there's all the tools that you can use, the mowing, the crimping, cultivation, what kinds of cultivation, seeders, what kind of seeders. It's just a really long, interesting list of things that can be achieved with cover crops. And I get bored really easily, so I need diversity in my work life. And so owning my own business has been fulfilling and it's necessary. But just farm management, really. When I was just managing my first vineyard management job, should I talk about that now? Was at Van Duzer Vineyards. And it was really satisfying to me because of all the things I got to do. I got to do all of the biological stuff that's involved in farming, but then all of the hands-on practical aspects of farming, as well, as frustrating as that and challenging as it was for me at the time, it still is. And then the labor management, working with a crew, being a good communicator, being a good record keeper, always a challenge, always improving there. It's been, farming in general is very satisfying for my easily bored brain. But the cover crops have always been a passion. Oh, the natives, don't forget that. The native plants and the restoration and the edges, that's it's like I've told people in the past that one of my goals is to sort of feather the edge between managed systems and native systems, right? So that it's like a good haircut, right? You want to just blend it. You want it to look faded. You don't want to have any abrupt straight lines because that doesn't exist in nature. And just because land is in private control doesn't mean it has no ecological value, and doesn't mean that it's not in an ecologically important location for certain species. I think a lot about migratory songbirds. Anyways, I might be getting off track here, but
it's fantastic. No, you're doing great. I'm curious though. You had mentioned that when you were kind of pulled out of sort of general cover crop or general work and in towards viticulture, there wasn't much known about cover crops. It wasn't a thing that people were talking about much here in the Valley. Tell me about your sort of initial impressions of Oregon viticulture at that time.
Well, I was working with people that were mostly involved with the live program. So they were really interested in the questions that I had. I think a lot of them, they wanted to learn how best to grow wine grapes with a small ecological footprint, smallest possible. So I was surrounded by people who were actively trying to get at that question, not just the people who I skipped over the part where I was a live inspector because I did it kind of throughout, but in the developing of the program and then when I was a vineyard inspector, these were the people I interacted with. And so if they weren't interested in sustainable viticulture, I didn't know them. This was the people I worked with. And so I found them incredibly receptive, and interested. And to me, I was like, well, this is the group of farmers I want to work with. These people they're the pioneers, right? Not only be examples to the people in their own industry in the Willamette Valley, in California and Washington, but also other industries, especially in this valley as we start, they're going to interact with these other farmers. And so if they start seeing, this cover crop works in wine grapes, maybe it can work in hazelnuts, which is where we're finally at. Like finally hazelnuts are starting to come around and dabble in alternative floor management to bare earth. So I don't know if it's because of the wine grape industry and what they see there, but I certainly know that I can use my experience working in perennial systems such as this perennial system, the wine grape industry, and apply what I've learned to hazelnuts. So it's what I'm attempting to do now. So, but yeah, the live program, I should talk about the live program. I mentioned that I started meeting with them on a voluntary basis, informal voluntary basis, as soon as I started studying wine grapes. And then I started doing inspections for the live program in 2008. And then I was able to really get to know the people that were members of the program, and get at what motivates them. And it was, at least in the beginning, very much altruistic. People wanted to do the best thing for the environment, and I think they really believed in the collective, we're going to all get together and say, this is the certification that we're going to get on board with. And I was really impressed by the certification because of its whole farm perspective and its requirement of an ecological set aside. right? If you're farming fence row to fence row, you don't fit in the program, And so I think that's just a really important, something that sets it apart from other certifications. And it's been accused of being a greenwashing, and that's a good debate to have. I think it's always good to debate and talk about things. It's kind of harsh to call it, greenwashing, but it's not organic, and it does allow some synthetic materials to be used. And again, it's a grower-led effort, and discussions are active and sometimes quite passionate. And my hope is that there's a certification for everybody to help them tell their story. And I was happy to be part of the Live program in that capacity for as long as I was, because I feel like it gives people an opportunity to really examine themselves and ask themselves, what am I doing and how can I improve? What am I doing? How can I improve? There's always room for improvement, in everything we do. So, it's a stab at it, and I can really respect people for attempting to make definitions like that, tell a collective story, because it can be very powerful to have a collective story like that.
Tell me about your role in inspecting and certifying. What was the process like, and how were you received?
Almost always warmly, not always. I would say 90% of the time I was received warmly, especially in the beginning. As the number of people in the certification grew, I think you just ended up with a lot of top-down people telling, hey, we're going to do this, and the managers weren't necessarily on board, and those were the people, ethically, those are the people I had to interact with, and so it was just like this bureaucratic, stuff that they had to deal with, and let's get this over with as quickly as possible kind of thing, and that's fine. People's time is valuable, and after a while, that's kind of one part of the reason I didn't want to be an inspector anymore. I wanted to be on the educational side. I wanted to be on the supportive side of interacting with them, more like here's an offer, not a requirement, even though I did occasionally have to say, this is a voluntary program that you signed up for. And they'd say, oh yeah, you're right. I'm not here from the government to tell you what to do. This is, you asked me to come. So, but mostly people were genuinely interested in, the feedback that I could bring and the sharing. And I would ask people, I probably asked people way more. I know I asked people way more than was on the scorecard, because I was curious, about practices, and people always would just be forthcoming with their information, and I would always say, hey, if you don't want me to share any of this, if you have any trade secrets, you probably just shouldn't tell me, because I would. It's my nature to want to help people, and so I, share ideas, and it's because the industry has a grounding in that, right? It's the pioneers, right? It's sort of the story that's been told for decades that the wine industry, pulled each other's bootstraps up, and so I guess I felt like I was in good company to be so chatty with people. But
transparent.
Yeah, transparent. But I think it's true that there's it's different now. Things have changed, and that's one reason I'm glad I'm no longer a vineyard inspector, because I can only be so professional and clean cut and tidy, and not stick to the scorecard and the script. I have a hard time with that, and so I'm in a better spot now. But I was just thinking about what I wanted to say about the live program when you asked me to be interviewed, and was reflecting on that. I miss being part of those conversations. So I think now that my business has gained some maturity, I kind of have a little bit more bandwidth that I can go back to that. So you heard it here first.
Just coming back to live.
Coming back to the live program. Yeah, I would like to. Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to back up to a second to Van Duzer as you're talking about your kind of first stab and all the things you're able to do. And so tell me about balancing. You mentioned kind of balancing sort of the things you had to do with the things you wanted to do when it came to farming and it came to biological changes. So what was the process like for you as you look out at it, as you took over a vineyard at that level? How did you approach it, and what were some of the things you remember impacts you made that you're proud of?
I really Carl Thoma, the owner, was, I appreciated him and Jim Kakasik giving me my first shot, like just hiring me, looking at my resume on what kind of experience does she actually have? Not much. Okay, well, she can cut her teeth here. Thank you. That was awesome. And I learned a lot from the crew. Those guys had been there for, decades, and really appreciated them. My Spanish improved greatly, quickly, and they were super patient and kind with me. I really enjoyed working with that crew. The first thing I did management-wise was to reduce the herbicide use. This was in 2009. So we bought a Braun grape hoe and started cultivating 1/3 of the vineyard every year, because I felt like that was practical. I didn't say, okay, we're going cold turkey, no more herbicides. I was like, let's try this and see, because I didn't want to go through and mow down the vineyard with the with the grape hoe, out of principle. So let's just, ease into this. And I thought, just putting it on a rotation so that we're lessening our herbicide use. Yeah. And it gave me time also to understand where maybe we could eliminate herbicides in some parts of the vineyard that were more vigorous, deeply rooted, those kinds of things, and just do some undervine mowing, and who knows, but I definitely wanted to reduce the herbicide use, because it was clear to me that the decades, it was an older vineyard. I mean, it was 25 years old at the time, the older vines, had taken its toll on the strip under the vine. You could just see the soil texture was completely different from anything in the vine row. And so I just thought, well, this is doable, right? This is the equipment exists for this. Let's start. And but I did go cold turkey organic fungicide program. Well, that's not entirely true. I did use a systemic synthetic fungicide at bloom, and then the rest of the canopy spray program was organic. So again, the pragmatic, farmer, just like, well, I don't want to screw this up. I want to keep the job. I want to, make small changes, and so did that, and started using all organic fertilizers as well. This is a good story. I bought a 275-gallon tote of cold-pressed fish fertilizer, which was smelly. And the guys just thought I was crazy, but we'd stir it up and we'd put it in the tank and put it on with, almost in the early part of the season, every spray would get a little bit of this cold pressed fish fertilizer, which is very oily, and I think definitely helped with some fungicide suppression. But the buzzards would come and circle over the vineyard when we sprayed the 80 acres with fish fertilizer. It was like, something's good over here. Anyway, that was pretty funny when I realized what was happening. Yeah. So there's some of the changes I made there. I also enrolled the whole property in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Partners Program. And that was a 10-year commitment. Van Duzer is adjacent to Basket Slough National Wildlife Refuge. And so the U.S. Fish and Wildlife that manages, staff that manages that refuge was interested in nearby oak habitats in order to get the population of Fender's blue butterfly to move and spill over into surrounding habitats. So they were really excited when I agreed, and the ownership agreed to enroll into this program. And we received a lot of great native plant material and technological advice and labor. Like they came and did the plantings. They did a lot of blackberry clearing, mechanical blackberry clearing on slopes that I wouldn't have wanted my staff on. So I'm like, thanks. But it was really, that was great. I was proud of that, that work. And then they come out and survey. The program is really great because what it does is it protects private landowners from any punishment from the Endangered Species Act should they ever damage an endangered species. So what they do is they come out and survey your property for the endangered species they're looking for, in this case, the Fender's blue butterfly, and they establish a baseline population. In our case, it was 0. And so if you were to eventually build up that population and then you see, 10, and then all of a sudden you need to spray for cutworm in your vineyard, and you accidentally, and that's a Lepidoptera anyway, and you accidentally kill some Fender's blue butterfly, you don't become subject to fines from the Endangered Species Act. So it's a really great program to encourage private landowners to do conservation work. Yeah. So I learned a lot about that there.
How did you start to build relationships with other people in your position at other vineyard sites? What was that relationship building like?
Well, geographically speaking, we had Left Coast Cellars right next door, and I had done crush at Left Coast in 2006, right when I finished my degree. And so Luke McCullum was the manager there for years, and so he was just right next door, and he knew me from crush, and whenever I needed anything and he had something I needed to borrow, I could go over there and borrow it, and he was always really generous, and we could talk shop, and he was really gentle and encouraging, and I really appreciated that. Sterling and Lee continued to be good mentors. If I had questions, I could always ask them, and I always felt safe talking to people, just groups in general, like live meetings, technical meetings, would always go to those. And I guess I never felt too scared to admit my ignorance, about certain things, because, you hear other people who you think, oh gosh, they're so experienced, and they know so much, and then they'll come up with a question, you're like, wow, okay, it's okay to not know everything, because if that person doesn't know everything, then there's a lot of questions, and we're all subjected to the same, conditions, and but then we all are farming all these little different micro spots too, so and different plant materials, and it was definitely, OSU held events, and I would go to meetings a lot and try to just glean information from people And people would always be generous. I also borrowed equipment from other farmers that weren't grape growers. And you're talking about, how do you get to know other grape growers? But just having good relationships with your neighbors in general, no matter what they farm. The Scharfs were neighbors, and I would borrow their ripper and eventually get it back after they called me a couple times. Oh yeah, okay, I didn't get it back. But yeah, no, they were, good neighbors to farm next to, and but Van Duzer is not located near many other vineyards, and so I wasn't exactly immersed in, surrounded by vineyard land, so it was me and Luke out there nearby each other. Actually, Lisa Zuniga was farming nearby too, and she and I became good friends, farming nearby each other, and a woman, and so she and I identified with each other. There weren't a lot of us in the beginning, so.
As you started to see results of cover crop with vineyard, what did you see, and was it what you expected?
I learned a lot, about triticale and how massive it can get and how hard it can be to manage. And, I have a picture of one of my vineyard workers who was not tall. He's a grown man, he's adult, but, he's like chest deep in triticale. You got, and the vines are buried, At that time, the vines are definitely way smaller than the cover crop time of year. So, but very quick changes could be made to the vines with a healthy cover crop. And the response time was quick, and that was really interesting to see. I mean, I learned that partly in grad school too, like. At Archery Summit, even though it wasn't to a degree of significance, we definitely reduced yield with 100% clover treatment. So it was too much nitrogen for the system, basically, and blew the fruit off the clusters. So, like necrosis, it was measurable. And so, yeah, just in 1 year, a cover crop treatment, depending on what you're planting, has a major effect on vine growth. So, and even uncultivated, right? Like we never even turned down that clover cover crop. It got really tall for a clover. It probably got 18, 20 inches tall. It was thick, but then all we did was mow it, and then it regenerated, and it never got cultivated down into the ground, and we saw that, reduction in yield. So, definitely learned about, it's worth kind of marking off smaller locations in the vineyard, and I'm trying to think who it was. It might have been Holstein talked about micromanaging the floor, and something he had done for a long, or maybe it was, I don't remember who it was I was talking to, but there's a lot of managers will do this, right? Well, they'll go in and mark off areas for micro cultivation. No, you're not like alternate row cultivating the entire block. You're just saying, okay, from this post to this post, we're going to cultivate every row or alternate rows, because we just need to take away the vigor competition a little bit. So just learned about, it's the floor management is a really important tool for controlling vine vigor, controlling the vigor and improving the vigor, right? And so again, just the power of cover crops, it's a really interesting question, and now people are interested in reducing their tillage. And I've always been interested in reducing my tillage, because it's a whole lot faster and cheaper to just run through and mow. Yeah, for sure. So, carbon aside, it's a lot more energetically effective to just have a perennial cover that you can mow. And so something that we haven't done a lot of yet, we've done a little bit of, and I need to do some more follow-up and find out how it's going. Just I think last year was some of the first plantings of tall fescue in order to ratchet down areas of high vigor. Those are going to require more mowing, but we have these vineyards that are planted sometimes not ideally, right? And so you end up with these, springs or just otherwise wet places. Typically it's a wet place in a vineyard where vigor gets a little out of control, or definitely, or just at least messes with block uniformity, and makes it hard to make picking calls and do canopy management. So if we can achieve this balance with just planting the right species on the floor, then it's worth doing.
Absolutely. So what was next for you after Van Duzer?
Van Duzer, Clara Jean Smith. She's my first daughter, or my only daughter, my first child. I got married in 2012, in the first part of the year, and at the end of the year, I had Clara. And I knew how much work it was to manage a vineyard, and I was 36 at the time, and I had always wanted to have a family, and I didn't want to try to do both. I didn't want to try. And my husband could support both of us, and he was offered a job in Northern California, so we left. We went to Northern California, lived in the Siskiyous in Weaverville, near Humboldt State, where I'd gone to school, near my family, and we spent a year living in the mountains, and just it was my do nothing but raise a baby year and hike to mountains and ski in the mountains with my baby on my back, which was not maybe the wisest thing to do, but she survived, and so did I, and it was really fabulous. And so I did continue to do live inspections. So I kind of kept my fingers in the industry there, came up and did inspections, brought her along and found babysitters, and did inspections probably with her on my back at times too. She came along at times. But that was 1 year, and then we ended up coming back to Corvallis after that. I continued to do live inspections, and I started teaching at Umpqua Community College. They were looking for someone to help with their grape management class. And so that was an online class, and they'd have a lab every other Friday, which was great. I could drive down to Roseburg every other Friday and fit that in, and it kept me in my brain, engaged with the industry, and it just fit the bill. It was perfect. I did that for 2 years, and Chemeketa also took me on for a class for a year, and taught that a couple times. Their intro to viticulture class, and an intro to grape management class, and so that's what I did. I pieced together, small things, the teaching, the live inspections. I had a second child in 2014. So 2012, 2014, my children were born. So I have a daughter and a son, Darian Smith, and that kept on going until I don't remember, 2019. My son was like preschool age, get out of diapers, and I was like, okay, I'm ready to go back to vineyard management and get my hands dirty again. And Armando Martinez picked me up to do viticulture for him, and he was running the cruise at Nicholson and doing the farming there, as well as a couple other smaller clients. And I was really excited to do that, but it turned out to be, for me, just too far away from home. It was like way up, north, and it was an hour on the road away from my little kids, and it was like, that just didn't really feel like the right thing either. So, and 19 is when right around harvest, I put together the first cover crop mix, pollinator pathway, right? Had like 20 species in it. And I mixed up 1,000 pounds. I sold it out of the back of my truck without even trying, right? Just called up the people I thought might be interested. And they're, sure, I'll take a bag, boom, boom, boom. And it was gone. And I thought, well, that was pretty easy. Like, let's try, maybe I can really finally do a seed business, And I mean, all in the back of my mind, I thought, maybe I could have a seed business. That'd be really interesting. I don't know, though, how that works. How do you even sell seeds? Like, how does that work? And that year in 19, I met Don Worth, who was another important mentor to me. He has Saddle Butte Ag. He's a founder, is the founder, I don't know, of Saddle Butte Ag, and he's a grass seed farmer, yeah? And met him through Peter Carnegie, who I knew from Oregon State research days, and the corn and beans where I started. And Don was a great mentor. He was like, you want to learn how to sell seeds? I'll teach you. And he helped me with the logo development. He helped me with, you buy it this way, you sell it this way, and we can get you started, and if you grow beyond us, that's cool, And I said, oh, well, okay. And that's, wow, okay. So he taught me the ropes. And I sat down that winter, 2019, 2020, and started a website. And then the world shut down. And I had a website. And I said, Armando, I can't keep doing this for you. I'm sorry, it's too far away. And that's when Buzz Seeds launched in 2020. And I had kids at home, trying to be a teacher to them and a mom, and do dishes constantly, and like it was, like everybody had to do, and it was nuts. But the business just took off, and I just had to run to keep up with it because I had never run a business on my own before like this, and found a warehouse, found somebody who would let me borrow their forklift, and it was a thrill, yeah. And it's just, I was humbled by how the wine industry received Buzz Seeds. They were like hungry for this, like diverse flowering seed mixes, the grasses that are appropriate for vineyards. Organic seeds were like virtually unavailable at the time, hard to get. And I, as a live inspector, was seeing these organic sites that would go unplanted to cover crop seed because they couldn't get the seed. And they were required to use organic seed. Well, that's not fitting with, the organic management practices. I know that people would prefer to be planting cover crops. So I started going after organic seed and providing that to people. And it just kind of has been growing on its own every year. Ken Lindy helped me out in the first, I think in the third and fourth years, or second and third years, with warehouse space, and was just really supportive of me as a businesswoman, because he's an independent businessman supporting the wine industry. He said, other people helped me out, and I want to help you out. We've got this warehouse. You can keep your seeds in here. And, I insisted on compensating him, because he was going to let me have it. I was like, no, Ken, thank you, but I'll pay you, because I know I'm going to be a pain in your butt, and I was. But he was very generous, him and Chris both, for a couple years, and now I'm renting another warehouse, and I feel like the vineyard, the business has matured to a point where I'm thinking about what's next, how does it grow, because I don't want to turn people away. I want people to have flowering mixes. I want to say yes to everybody. So, every business kind of, I think, if it's successful, reaches that point where they have to think about, who to hire and, where to spend the money on the growth. So I'm, last year I gave up vineyard management. I had been managing a small vineyard in the Kings Valley for 10 years. And last year is the first year I didn't harvest grapes in a very long time. And that was weird. It was a great relief. Like my body thanked me a lot. But it was definitely different and kind of sad, because the harvest is really joyful thing to participate in. And making wine has always been a fun thing to do at home, with my husband and friends. And but I have a feeling I can, acquire some grapes if I need to make more wine. It shouldn't be too hard, if that's what I miss the most is making wine, then there'll be opportunities for that. But it was just different to not be harvesting. I do still consult on a small 6-acre vineyard in the Philomath area, Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay young vineyard, who is he's learning the ropes.
To pass it along.
Yeah, I like having. I love pruning. I love vineyard management. It's really delightful industry, the actual vines. I like working with the growers, but I also like something about pruning. Really, pruning is my favorite. Shoot thinning you can have, but no, but all of it. It's high touch and it's very mentally. It's physically difficult, but it's calming. Mentally. And I like the physical work, It's been a good motivation. Like the throwing around of 50-pound bags is part of what I do. And as I age, we lose muscle mass. And so knowing that season is always coming is good motivation for me to stay fit. So I try to lift and stay strong and try to avoid injury. Because if I go down, with an injury, I don't know, it's just one of those things maybe that's the person I hire, a bag chucker.
Bag chucker.
Yeah, and I've hired a couple bag chuckers, and they've been fantastic. I just didn't end up, because I'd given up the vineyard management this year, I was able to do it without help this year. That was noticeably different, but.
So with the business, you mentioned it took off right away. Let's talk about the product first. Tell me about building the product. How do you go about choosing what you're going to choose, and how has it evolved, if it has, in the years you've been doing it?
Well, the thing I wanted to provide everything that people needed, right? I wanted to be a kind of a one-stop shop for cover crops. Or for land managers, kind of in general, because I also have a pasture mix. But even a lot of the growers, the wine grape growers, are grazing. Grazing has become a really popular thing, and that's great. I love to see diversity in agricultural systems. So I've had to learn how the seed industry works, right? Dawn Worth at Saddle Butte, they do a lot of traditional cover crop, plow down type species. They sell all over the country. and a little bit internationally, like most seed growers and wholesalers in the Willamette Valley. Like they sell all over the nation. But some specialize in some genetics, and some types of seed. So I've learned what suppliers to work with depending on what I'm looking for, yeah? And I've really appreciated Troy Ralston at Bailey Seed giving me honest advice, instead of saying, hey, we can provide everything you need. He said, I encourage you to shop around. Because he knew that, he knew he did certain things well, and he wants as much of my business as possible, and he gets a lot of it. I do a lot of work with Bailey. We have a great relationship, and Bailey's been supplying seeds to the Oregon wine grape growers for a long, long time. So it's been an interesting conversation and dance. Like how does wholesale and retail even work in this industry, right? Because it doesn't seem to be very clear. It's not like, a grocery store. Like you don't go to Tyson Chicken to buy your chicken. You go to the grocery store, and the grocery store is the retail outlet for Tyson. Tyson's, anyways. It's been, I still don't, it's not clear. It's not clear, but somehow I've found a niche, and everybody seems to be happy as far as I can tell. And we're doing business, and I have been, trying to follow paths and ask questions and talk to as many people as possible about, you asked about how do I know what to put in my mixes. Seed breeders, yeah, of turf, for example, because there's really just a few kinds of classifications of seeds, right? We have turf seeds. You have that I work with, let's say, okay? Turf seeds. You have cereal grain seeds. You have pasture seeds. Those are the grasses, okay? I mean, excluding the vegetable grass, which is like corn, right? I don't put, corn's in its whole other category, right? Corn does lots of things. And I don't work with vegetable seeds at all. But flower seeds, okay? That's another group of seeds. And most of the flower seed producers in the valley only do flower seeds, right? And there's a few. And then there's native seeds, okay? And a lot of folks are looking for native seeds, yeah? And that's in very limited supply. So they're very well adapted to our region, and so I'm interested in using native seeds, and I do use some native seeds. And I've learned what works well after the years of observing, yeah? And sometimes it's a matter of what's available, yeah? So that changes over time. You said, how does it change? It changes over time based on sometimes what's available, and also my observations and the observations of my customers, yeah? Like, sometimes it's just like, oh, there was too much of that in this mix. We can cut back on it. Or this thing has been planted and has never shown up for 2 or 3 years. Well, we can eliminate that. It's just not showing up. Or in the case of thyme, T-H-Y-M-E, I put that in the pollinator pathway mix in the first year and never saw it, took it out, and then in year 3 saw it at Chemeketa. And it was like, look, there it is, it's thyme, it's growing in the vineyard. Like, it just, definitely that came from my seed mix. You don't accidentally have thyme pop up, and the birds don't just drop that off, like everything else. But anyway, so observations, anyway. And literature, I do a lot of reading. And industry meetings in other like organic vegetable production, like whenever there's a conversation about cover crops, I want to listen, right? Because I can apply that to lots of systems. And I don't just sell to the wine grape industry. I mentioned hazelnuts, but because I'm supplying diverse mixes and organic mixes, lots of people come to me, local people, yeah. So vegetable farmers, organic certified folks, and the pasture mix has been popular to a degree for people with livestock, small scale livestock production. Yeah, that's how I decide. Lots of conversations, observations, literature, research, like that.
How do you find that most people are finding you?
I try to ask people when they call me from out of the blue and I don't know them, which is more and more. Yeah, people find me on Google. People, word of mouth. I try to find, I met this fellow, Brian Roeder, a few years ago. He found me through the local soil water conservation district, who I had reached out to in Hood River to let them know what I was doing. And he was a successful businessman with New Seasons Market. And so he turned me on to a book about marketing, and now I'm told that the people that I instinctively had been and now have a label for reaching out to are called mavens. Now, these people who are well connected, basically, and talk. Yeah, they're like sociable people, and it's kind of their job in some cases to extend information out, like where do I get cover crop seeds. And so the soil water conservation districts are important people to stay in touch with. OSU, I'm really engaged with OSU. I did a couple of years ago, Andoni Melithopoulos reached out to me, or maybe I met him, maybe I reached out to him initially. Anyway, we worked together on a bee habitat on wine grape vineyard grant. So I helped him connect to the industry. I was like his industry liaison kind of person, on that grant. And so that's, actually I really enjoyed working with him. It's become really important work to me. To me, it's like the Bee Atlas work that he's working on now, where the citizen scientists go out and they survey and look for bees, and especially on the wine grape vineyards habitat, it's like a whole nother currency, right? It's like, how do you measure success when you're farming, right? Is it cases sold, profits? Is it employee retention? Is it years in business? Is it number of bee species found on your vineyard? It's like a whole nother currency, It's like, how do you measure stewardship? Well, people who know me know that I'm an oak conservationist. I'm surprised it took me this long to get to this. And so, I don't apologize for being an oak conservationist. It's something I've talked about passionately for years to people who, I'm sure a lot of them disagree with me. And it kills me to see native oaks fall, especially now when we have overplanted and there's no market and there's hundreds of tons unsold. Heavy pregnant pots. It's just unethical, and it's not what Oregon wine should stand for. It's the opposite of that. I truly feel like the wine industry is well positioned to be the most powerful voice for oak conservation. should they choose to be that. And there, the Willamette Oak Accord was a great start of that. But it started and ended. And there's no momentum there. And planting continues. And oaks fall. And a person who will not be named, for example, that I've worked with recently, took down a whole lot of oaks and planted a bunch of young vines. And I learned that this person ignored the advice of people whose advice he sought about planting and conservation. He said, I want to do the right thing. I want to be a good land steward. So he talked to the Soil Water Conservation District person, and she came out and she gave him her advice. And she said, plant that over there, but maybe not this over here. You can leave these trees. And then he went and talked to somebody else whose job it was to remove the trees. And that person said, I'm not going to remove those trees. So he didn't get the job. Somebody else came down and cut down the trees for him. So when that happens, then smoke starts coming out of my ears, and my face gets really red, and I'm like super motivated to do something. And I don't know what the something is yet. Lately, my latest hypothesis or idea has been to try to go down the archaeological route, the cultural heritage route, like the oaks of a certain DBH, diameter at breast height, that's a forestry term, okay, have archaeological value because those oaks were alive and supported Native American families at one time. Like that tree, Drew Herman and I were talking about this because I was fuming at one time. I was talking to Drew and he said, oh yeah, come check this out, this archaeological, relic. It's a old cistern, concrete cistern that the winery was built around because they weren't allowed to touch it. How does a block of concrete have more value than an ancient oak tree? I would like to know. I would like someone to answer that who has some kind of power, I just need to, I guess, walk into the Capitol building because, I've sent letters and I don't know. I need to get more personal with my outreach activities here. And it doesn't have to be, I don't feel like I'm an enemy of the wine industry by saying this. I feel like the Oregon wine industry, like I said, has an opportunity to put the oak tree on their bottle and say, we are stewards of this land and we know what that means. We have practices that protect our heritage, and it's not about soil conservation. Soil conservation is tier 1 stewardship, right? That's like keeping the soil on the ground is tier 1 stewardship, okay? Keeping it there. We can do so much better. I won't say anything more about that.
I can sense you just holding yourself back. You mentioned not having a great idea for what the next step would be after the Oak Accord. Is there something you could foresee yourself being part of that would make an impact?
Well, lately, to me, just spreading the word, because so many people come to me for cover crop work, right? And so if I'm knowledgeable of some concrete way that we can be protecting oak habitats, I will share that with every single customer that I have. Okay, and the list grows daily, like not daily, weekly, for sure. This time of year, it's more like weekly, right? But it's a long list of people who have ecological farming values, right? People don't come to me for basic cover crops, or Wilco seeds. They can go to Wilco for Wilco seeds. there is in the state of Oregon a habitat tax class, right? Status. So we know we have farm, we know we have forest, right? This was, the wine industry was actually at the table when these land use classifications were set in place. And, were instrumental in helping define, those rules to protect farm and forest land, which is, we have some of the strongest, land protection rules in the country. But it's now we've come to this point where we need to be thinking about saving what's left. And there is a habitat tax classification, but it's put upon the Oregon Department of Wildlife to do the assessments. So it's their responsibility to go out to the land, to the site, and say, yes, this landowner is managing this property for healthy habitat actively, right? It's not a passive thing. They're expected to be actively managing their property for habitat improvements, okay? If that's planting native plants, if that's controlling noxious weeds, it's got to be an active engagement, right? I feel like that's an untapped, I don't think people know about it, first of all, and it's underutilized. I've talked to vineyard managers that own vineyard management companies, and they, at least one of them recently told me that they thought that some of these tiny vineyards that are planted are only done so to achieve the tax deferral for tax reasons, right? They could have gone another way had they known, yeah. So there's inroads to be made, and education. I'm learning myself so that I can share this with people. I haven't found anybody at Fish and Wildlife, for example, who yet wants to be the champion of this and go out and be, oh yeah, you want to, let's talk at the wine symposium about it. Let's talk about it here and there, and push it, because I don't know why, but if I have to be that person, I'll be that person. But I'm wrapping my head around it and learning how it works. And obviously I still don't quite have the lexicon, but I'm,
the passion.
I have the passion. I do have the passion. I just need to be super clear, what the program is and what the opportunities are. I've only just discovered it and learning about how it works. So
you talked a bit about Buzz, obviously, and about the way it's grown so far. Tell me about sort of long-term vision for the business. Do you have a goal in mind? Do you have a future plan?
I don't have I would love to grow the business. I would love to keep saying yes to people. I don't have any aspirations to be a national business. I love being here on the West Coast. I wouldn't mind selling more into Washington, more in Northern California. But I have limited capacity, personally. I like the idea of teaming up with somebody. I kind of see that in my future. Just so that I can feel a little more engaged in the broader cover crop world, in the seed world. I'm a board member of the Western Cover Crops Council, and that has helped a lot with me feeling like I'm engaged in the broader cover crop world. That group is a lot of academics, which is awesome. But I also feel like I'm in industry, and I really like being in industry because it gets stuff done, on a large scale. It's let's just do it and find out how it worked later. You know what I mean? Then if it works, then you got to try it. You know what I mean? But it's great to be working with both, people who are willing to take a chance, based on what we think will work, and then academics who are going to figure out in detail with us, what works, how to manage it, publish it, get it out there. I love working with both. So I definitely, I don't know exactly what the future of BuzzSeeds is going to be, but I want to be more collaborative, continue building on the collaborations that I've started with academics and industry.
So let's talk about the industry a bit more from a 35,000 foot view. You talked kind of about your initial impressions of Oregon viticulture. How have you seen viticulture, vineyard management evolve in the time you've been around the Oregon industry, and what do you see as the next step?
Well, there's trends, people try things and they try them out for a while, and then if it works, it'll stick, right? And if it doesn't work, then it's not doesn't work. It'll have to end. So there's definitely a lot more. My impression is, and I don't know what the numbers are. My impression is, there's a lot more sustainable organic growers out there. Definitely away from herbicides. That's been a very clear trend, which is great and exciting, and again, pioneering. Like if we can do it, you can do it. Other farmers, kind of thing, and that's great. It's a weed tolerant crop. There's no need to be using a lot of herbicides, especially when they're mature. The reduction in tillage. I hear the vole population has been bad this winter, and so we have to be making money. We have to be, it's farming, you can't just entirely, make principled decisions no matter what. I'm only going to do it this way, even though, your crop is suffering. If you can afford to do that, then do it, But I think the goal is to, produce quality, beautiful grapes that at a, and make money at the same time, and at least not lose money. So, and then obviously the scale of production is so much bigger now. It's, so much more mechanized. Which is necessary in some ways, It's a little less personable, just the scale of it also, just the number of people, you can't know everybody, We used to know everybody, and now it's like, wow, it's so many unfamiliar faces. You were talking about the size of the symposium. It's like, it's not a small town anymore, So that's fine, it's just life. And, it's an exciting industry to be part of. You can't blame people to want to join it, that they want to be part of it. It's got a lot of beauty and allure.
Where do you see it going next?
Boy, $1 million question. Well, whoever has the most the money to keep pouring into it, and I don't know. It can't keep growing the way it has been, can it? Not the way it has been. So, ask me again after the symposium.
Close.
Yeah, well, they're going to be talking about it a lot there this year.
Like 35 years, pretty much, of uninterrupted growth at this point. It's kind of crazy.
Well, we all knew we would reach a point like this, and so it wasn't like unexpected. I think it's just like, okay, here we are.
You've talked a little bit about what's next for you, but I'm curious, anything else on the horizon personally or professionally that you're excited about?
Well, I've gotten to do some international travel again. I hadn't traveled since my children were born. And I'm just really looking forward to this phase of family rearing. You know, they're 12 and 10, and I can take them on trips now and not feel like whatever. They're a burden, you know, they're like company, you know. So I went actually with Bob Bug on my own, just the two of us, well, not just the two of us. He invited me on an organized trip to Cuba in early December. So that happened this past year, and it was very eye-opening to learn about, you know, the failed state that's happening 80 miles off our shore and the sanctions that have been on them for 60 years that have been pretty ineffective at regime change. And they're suffering right now badly. And so that's been a big part of my heart, has been occupied with Cuba lately, just because of that visit. And it does make me think about, actually, you were talking about buzz seeds in the future, it makes me think about tropical agriculture. It makes me think about, you know, what can I do to help the people in Cuba? You know, and if I learn how to farm in Cuba, you know, what kind of roads does that open? Like, what can, you know, I have a friend farming in Hawaii, Kona, you know, like maybe if I learn how to farm in tropical systems, maybe I can write off some really cool trips. No, I mean, I just, you know, maybe I can be helpful in a place that needs help, you know. That's what I want to be, helpful. But yeah, taking the kids in March to Mexico. We're going to go to the Yucatan, take them to the Mayan ruins, do some exploring, get them out of their, you know, little worlds, and immerse ourselves in something different. So travel. My music, I'm in a band. I sing in a band.
What kind of band?
It is a cover band. We do songs that span 60 years probably. Yeah, so it's just whatever Rebecca wants to sing, basically, at the top of her lungs. February 7th, Tallman Brewing, Lebanon. It's our first show, yeah.
First show?
First show, yeah. It'll be a first show, yeah. We've got bass, drums, guitar, keys, and then me on vocals. And we have a 22-year-old, a 33-year-old, 44-year-old, 40-something-year-old, that's me, and then a 62-year-old. So we span, you know, quite a number of generations there, and I love that. I love working with younger people, older guys, and that we're, you know, putting all this music together for people. This is my third semi-professional band.
And what's the band called? Called
Sweet Vega.
Sweet Vega. Nice.
After my dad's car. And my name, yeah. I mean, you got to name it something. Naming something is very difficult.
It's very difficult, yeah. How did you come up with Buzz?
That was sitting down with the crew at Saddle Butte Ag and tossing around ideas and, yeah. Brainstorming.
It's about bees, so I get it.
Yeah, and like, what's the buzz? You know, what's the buzz about? Unfortunately, buzzseeds.com, the URL is buzzcovercropseeds.com, because Buzz Seeds takes you to a marijuana seed guy who I think still owns it. I should probably revisit that. Maybe I could finally get Buzz Seeds. It's not that. I don't sell those kinds of seeds.
We got off on the band. Is anything else you're looking forward to that I hope I didn't cut you off?
I mean, that's so satisfying. The family, you know, they tend to grow. They are growing, and getting busier. You know, we're going to do a lot of mountain biking this year. My daughter's joining a team, and I'm very proud of her. So I just want to, you know, I want to grow a girl who has grit, and I want to grow a boy who can ballroom dance. And if I can achieve those two things,
Noble.
Then I will consider myself a successful parent. Yes.
It's fantastic. I like those are good goals. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, taking care of a family is no small chore. I mean, that's like a lot, and that's a laudable thing, right? I mean, you know, my parents are getting older. Who knows what kind of care they might need? My husband's parents, you know, I just want like to preserve some time and not overcommit myself to any one thing or another, so that you have space for people, right? Like, I've helped a couple of girlfriends through divorces recently, and I just really like being that friend that they can call at 10 o'clock at night and lose it with, you know? And that takes, I like knowing that I have set aside that time for people. Yeah.
It's a good, strong ethos. I like that.
I mean, things fall through the cracks, but, you know, because I set that side of time, you know, that time aside. I mean, you know, because Buzz Seeds is very seasonal, I can sort of compartmentalize my time a little bit that way, you know. Like, I load up all my fun things in the spring and winter, you know, because I know that summer and fall are intensely busy, and I work really hard at that time. So in the other times, I kind of give myself grace, you know, like, I'm gonna go to the gym today, I'm gonna go to the pool today, I'm gonna call my friend today, check on them, you know, kinds of things. You know, I'm gonna go to the basketball game, and I'm gonna, you know, take care of the kids, and I'm gonna bake bread, you know. And Buzz Seeds simmers, and I go to meetings, and I keep at this time of year, I'm starting to, you know, get busy again, you know, put the mixes together, do business, check in with customers, you know, expand my customer network a little bit. But I want to make sure that I'm maintaining all of the relationships with people that I've been serving, right? Because I learn from them, and we learn together, right? And they got me off the ground. I want to make sure that all these people are getting what they need, and they keep coming back to me. God bless them. You know? I want to make sure they keep coming back to me. I want to make them happy. So that's just staying in contact, showing up, making sure their needs are met. Yeah, that's it. That's the stuff that I look forward to, you know?
It's a good list.
Yeah. I mean, we farm at home, so we do little things like that, like raise lambs and make fermented hot sauces and garlic and, you know, food preservation, that kind of thing. So that's just homestead scale farming. But that's just life. I don't think that is like what I don't think of that as anything like an activity. That's just like life, you know? That's like brushing your teeth, you know? Of course you know, grow your own vegetables.
Of course. Last question for you. Biggest accomplishment or proudest achievement as you look back right now, what are you proudest of?
I'm really proud of Buzz Seeds. I feel like it's a culmination of all of my work, and it's the longest job I've held. I was a student for a long time, but you know, I'm really passionate about it, and it's been well received by the industry, and I get lots of encouragement. I have another friend who's a businesswoman, Allison Coots, and she sells beneficial insects to organic farmers. And she's been always like a champion of me too. Like people like her who remind me how significant it is to do what I'm doing. You know, I'm really proud of Buzz Seeds. I'm proud that I'm still married because I'm tough. You know, marriage is tough, and so I'm proud of that. Yeah, I feel like I've done some emotional growing, you know, which is something you hope that everyone can do as an adult and continue down that path. So take that and apply it to family and the business, and, you know, that should benefit both, right? So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Being honest and transparent and all those things, and it's good. I'm proud of that.
Absolutely. All right, all the questions that I have for you today. Anything I didn't ask that I should have, or anything that we didn't cover today that you wanted to cover?
I think I touched on everything now that we did the Oaks, the band. I was like, those things I always forget.
We got live, we got teaching.
Live teaching, the family. Yeah, obviously buzz seeds. Yeah, the wine, it's, why you're doing what you're doing here in this, and I'm just really grateful to be part of the industry.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time, coming up to see us today. I appreciate you sharing your story with us. We'll let you off the hook.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
Honor and privilege.